Lira stood in the center of the gathering circle, her hands shaking, her heart heavy. The cold stone ground beneath her feet made her feel smaller than she already was. Eyes were on her, hundreds of eyes, judging, whispering, waiting for her. Shamed to be spoken aloud, she was different, and in her world, being different was never a blessing, it was a curse. Her people valued one thing above all: the ability to breed, to continue the line, to give birth to the next generation. It was not a choice. It was not about love. It was duty, cold and simple. Every woman was tested when she reached her season. Every woman was measured, ranked, and declared fit. But when Lira's time came, the elders had spoken with harsh voices. "She is not breeding material," they announced, as if they were passing a death sentence. The words echoed through the hall like a blade slicing through. Her spirit whispers filled the air, cruel whispers that cut deeper than knives. "She is useless," someone muttered. "She cannot serve her purpose." Another added, "She should be buried where she stands." A voice hissed, filled with disgust. Lira's chest tightened, her breath caught, but she lifted her chin. Anyway, she would not let them see her break. "I am not breeding material," she shouted, her voice trembling but fierce. "Then bury me here, for I will not be claimed, not by any of you, not ever." The crowd gasped, for no one had dared to speak against the tradition so openly. Her oath was bold, dangerous. But in that moment, it was the only weapon she had left. Her mother turned away, shame burning on her face. Her father said nothing, his silence louder than any curse. The elders frowned, their eyes like sharp stones. And yet Lira did not move. She stood tall, though inside she was crumbling. When the gathering ended, she walked alone, her feet dragging. Across the dust, every step felt heavier than the last. The voices of the others still rang in her head, laughing, mocking, calling her broken. Some girls avoided her gaze, others smirked with cruel delight. She was no longer one of them, no longer part of her people's future. She was an outcast, marked forever. That night she sat by the riverbank, her reflection staring back at her. In the dark water, her eyes looked hollow, her lips pressed tight. She touched her chest and whispered to herself, "Why was I born this way? Why am I the broken one?" Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she quickly wiped them away. Crying would not change her fate, but anger could keep her alive. The stars shone above, bright and cold. Her people believed the stars chose who would breed and who would be barren. But Lira no longer trusted the stars. She felt they had betrayed her. "Bury me if you must," she whispered again to the night. "I will not let you decide my worth." Days turned into weeks and the whispers never stopped. When she walked through the market, people turned their backs. When she sat alone, others moved away as if her brokenness was a disease. The loneliness clawed at her soul, but she refused to bow. Better to be hated than pitied. Better to stand alone than to be claimed by force. She began to wander farther from her village, seeking silence in the wild hills. The world beyond was dangerous, full of storms, beasts, and whispers of war with other species. But Lira preferred the danger of the unknown over the cruelty of her own people. Each time she climbed the high ridges, she shouted her oath to the winds. "Bury me here, I will never be claimed." The hills carried her words like a cry of defiance, though no one but the stars heard them. Still, in the quiet of her heart, a shadow lingered. She told herself she was strong, but a part of her longed for more, not to be breeding material, not to be used, but to be seen, to be valued, to be loved for who she was. Yet such a thing felt impossible in her world. Her people would never change, the stars would never forgive her, and so she buried that hope deep inside, hiding it like a fragile seed. But the universe had its own secrets. While she cursed the stars above, somewhere beyond them, eyes were watching, eyes not of her kind, eyes that would see her not as broken but as something far more powerful. For though she believed her story was already written, the truth was only beginning, and the oath she swore that night would echo across worlds, shaping a future she could never imagine. Lira woke to the sound of silence, the kind of silence that made the heart ache. The village was already alive, voices calling, footsteps rushing, tools clanging. But none of those sounds reached her hut. None were meant for her. Her home had become like a shadow on the edge of the community, forgotten yet not gone. She stepped outside, the morning sun spilling across the dusty paths. Children ran past, laughing, their voices like music she could no longer join. One little girl glanced at her, then quickly turned away as if she had seen something cursed. That look struck deeper than any blade. Lira held her head high, though. Her chest tightened. She wanted to scream, to shout that she was more than what they had named her. But no one would listen. Not here. When she entered the market, the air grew heavy. Whispers rose like smoke around her. She should not be here, one voice said. She is broken, another added. Even the vendors pulled their goods closer, as if her touch would ruin them. Every step reminded her of the weight she carried, the invisible mark of failure on her back. She paused at a stall of fresh fruit, her fingers brushing a round, glowing piece. The vendor's hand shot out, slapping hers away. "Not for you," he snapped. Her throat burned with unshed words, but she bit them back. Instead, she turned away, carrying her hunger with her. The fruit was not worth the fight. Nothing here was worth the fight anymore. Her hut felt colder with each day. Nights were the worst. When the village fires glowed bright in the distance, laughter rising like a cruel song. She lay on her bed of woven reeds, staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks. Her mind repeated the words of the elders like a curse. Not breeding material. 3 words that had stolen her name, her worth, her place. 3 words that had turned her into the broken one. But though she felt the weight of despair, a spark of anger still lived in her chest. It was small, fragile, but it was there. Each morning when she looked into the river's reflection, she whispered to herself, "I am not broken. They only fear what they cannot understand." Her voice shook, but she forced herself to say it again and again. It was the only shield she had left. Days blurred together, but her mind would not rest. Sometimes she wondered if she should leave the village forever. The wild hills called to her. The mountains whispered promises of freedom, yet fear held her back. Out there, beasts roamed, storms raged, and rumors spoke of other races drawing near. Still, the thought of staying, of rotting in the shadow of her people's judgment, felt worse than death. One evening, as the red sun dipped low, Lira climbed a ridge above the valley. From there she could see the lights of her village glowing like tiny stars, so close yet so far. She spread her arms wide, the wind rushing past her face. "Bury me here," she shouted again into the open air. "I will not be claimed." Her voice echoed through the canyon, the words bouncing back to her. For a brief moment she felt strong, defiant, almost free. But when the echo faded, the silence returned. She was still alone. The other women no longer spoke to her, except with their eyes sharp and cruel. One afternoon, as she passed near the wells, she overheard them. "She should have left already," one said. "She brings shame just by breathing." Another sneered. Lira clenched her fists, nails. Digging into her palms, she wanted to strike, to shout. But she knew it would only prove their point, so she walked on, each step heavy with anger, each breath thick with sorrow. At night, her dreams turned dark. She dreamed of endless halls where faceless judges repeated her sentence. Not breeding material, over and over until the words became a scream. She would wake, drenched in sweat, clutching her chest, gasping for air. In those moments, she wondered if perhaps they were right. Maybe she was cursed. Maybe she was less than nothing. But then, deep inside, another voice whispered, "No, you are more. You are different. And that is your strength." Still, hope was fragile. Each day chipped away at it. Each whisper in the market, each mocking look. She felt herself shrinking, fading, becoming invisible even to herself. And yet, the universe had a strange way of listening to broken hearts somewhere beyond the stars. Something stirred, something watched. And though Lira did not know it yet, her cries to the wind were not lost. They had traveled farther than she could ever imagine. And soon, her path would cross with a force that no tradition, no elder, no cruel whisper could control. But for Now she remained the broken one alone, cast aside, waiting for the world to decide if she would vanish into silence or rise against it. The war had been a whisper at first, a distant rumor carried by traders and wanderers. They spoke of strange beings who came from the stars, beings unlike any Lira's people had seen. They called themselves humans, and they did not bow to anyone. Where her people relied on traditions and rules, humans fought with fire and steel. Where her people divided the worthy from the broken, humans lifted their weakest and marched as one. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, the ground shook with a deep roar. Lira climbed a ridge to see smoke rising in the distance, thick and black. The air carried the bitter smell of burned metal, the faint echo of battle cries. Her people had gone to fight, and though she was not allowed near the warriors, she could see the flames from afar. Her heart raced, not from loyalty to her people, but from the fear of something unknown. The night dragged on with fire lighting the horizon. She could not sleep. She could not look away. When dawn came, the smoke still lingered and the valley felt heavy with silence. Her people returned with wounded bodies and weary eyes, but among them came whispers of humans, of their strength, of their strange courage. Some called them demons, others called them savages, but all agreed on one thing: humans were dangerous. Lira listened from the shadows as the elders argued. "They must be destroyed," one shouted. "They will not stop until they own what is ours," another warned. But beneath their words, she sensed fear that her people had never known before. A week later, Lira wandered farther than she ever had. She followed the river downstream where the forest grew thick and untamed. Birds scattered above her. The air smelled of damp earth and ash. That was when she heard it. A faint groan, low and pained. She froze, her heart pounding. Every instinct told her to run, but curiosity held her in place. Slowly, carefully, she stepped toward the sound. There, against the trunk of a fallen tree, lay a figure unlike any she had seen. Broad shoulders, strange armor scorched and broken, a face pale yet strong. A human. His eyes were closed, his breaths shallow, blood stained his side. For a long moment, Lira could not move. This was the enemy her people feared, the demon they spoke of. Yet lying there, he did not look like a demon. He looked fragile. Her first thought was to leave him, to let the forest claim him. Her people would never forgive her for helping. But something inside her stirred, something that whispered against the weight of tradition. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she reached to touch his armor. His eyes opened, startling her. They were not like her people's eyes. No glow, no coldness. Just a sharp human gaze filled with pain and defiance. For a moment, neither spoke. Lira's breath caught in her throat, her body frozen between fear and awe. Then, in a voice rough but steady, the human spoke. "You're not one of them," he said slowly, his accent strange but clear. Lira's heart pounded, her lips parted, but no words came. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not as broken, not as useless, but simply as someone standing before him. Finally, she found her voice. "I am Lira," she whispered. The human's brow furrowed, but his lips curved in the faintest smile. "Daniel," he answered, his name carried like a promise. Then his body sagged, his strength fading. Without thinking, Lira pressed her hands against his wound, trying to stop the blood. It felt foolish, hopeless, yet she could not let him die. Hours passed as she tended to him, tearing her own cloak to bind his side. He drifted in and out of sleep, muttering words she could not understand. But each time he opened his eyes, he looked at her, not with hate, not with judgment, only with something she had never known. Trust. As the sun set again, Lira sat beside him, her mind racing. She should have walked away, she should have let him fade, but instead, she felt something stir deep inside. For the first time in her life, someone needed her. Not for breeding, not for duty, but for life itself. The thought both frightened and warmed her. When night fell, Daniel whispered weakly, "Why are you helping me?" Lira stared at the stars, her chest heavy. "Because I know what it feels like to be left behind," she answered softly. The forest around them was quiet, but in that moment the silence no longer hurt. It felt like the beginning of something neither of them could yet understand. And though she could not see the future, Lira sensed that this meeting was no accident. Her oath had reached the stars, her pain had been heard, and the answer had come in the form of a wounded human lying at her side. The world she knew was about to change forever. The forest wrapped them in silence, broken only by Daniel's shallow breaths. Lira sat beside him through the night, her eyes heavy but her heart restless. She should have feared him. She should have hated him. He was the enemy of her people. But when she looked at him, she saw no monster, only a man clinging to life. When morning came, Daniel stirred, his face pale but his eyes alive. He tried to sit up, wincing as pain gripped his side. "Don't move," Lira whispered sharply, placing her hand on his chest. "You'll tear the wound open." He looked at her, surprised by her concern, and a weak smile touched his lips. "You saved me," he said, his voice rough like broken glass. Lira turned away, heat rising in her cheeks. "I only did what anyone would," she muttered, though she knew it was a lie. No one in her village would have saved him. No one would have dared. Over the next days, Lira cared for him in secret. She brought water from the river, herbs from the hills. She washed his wounds with gentle hands, her heart tightening every time he flinched in pain. Daniel spoke little, at first conserving his strength, but slowly, words began to pass between them. He told her of his people, of humans who lived under one sky but carried many hearts. He spoke of battles, of hope, of a will to survive that never bent. Lira listened, her eyes wide, her chest aching with emotions she did not understand. "You humans," she whispered, "one evening. You are not like us." Daniel chuckled softly, the sound weak but warm. "No, and you are not like them either," he said, looking into her eyes. For a moment, her breath caught, his words sinking deep. She was different, but for the first time, different did not feel like broken. Each day the bond grew stronger, fragile yet undeniable. Lira found herself speaking of her own pain, her rejection, her oath. She told him how her people had cast her aside, how they had marked her unworthy. Daniel listened, his gaze steady, his jaw tight with anger. "They were wrong," he said firmly. "Your worth is not theirs to decide." No one had ever spoken those words to her. She clutched them like a flame against the cold. At night, they shared stories beneath the stars. Daniel spoke of earth, of oceans that stretched farther than sight, of forests older than memory. Lira told him of her childhood, of dreams she once had before they were crushed. In those moments she felt something she had long forgotten. Belonging, not with her people, but with this strange human lying injured at her side. But shadows lurked beyond the trees. Her people searched the forest for wounded enemies. If they found Daniel, they would kill him without hesitation. If they discovered Lira had helped him, they would exile her forever. Or worse. The thought chilled her, yet she could not walk away. Every time she looked at him, she felt a pull. Something stronger than fear, stronger than shame. One evening, as the firelight flickered, Daniel reached for her hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes burned with quiet strength. "You don't have to stay," he whispered. "You owe me nothing." Lira's throat tightened. Tears stung her eyes, but she shook her head, her fingers tightening around his. "I know," she whispered back, "but I want to stay." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of trust, of something neither dared to name. Days passed and Daniel grew stronger. He could sit up now, even stand with her help. When he stumbled, she caught him. When he faltered, she steadied him, and each time he looked at her with eyes that saw not a broken outcast, but a person. It frightened her, it warmed her, it changed her. But the world beyond their hidden place was not still. Her people grew restless, their anger toward humans burning hotter with each passing day. Voices in the village rose like storms, calling for blood. Lira heard them when she ventured back for supplies, their words like knives. They must be crushed, the elders declared. They bring only corruption and ruin. Lira lowered her head, hiding her secret. Her heart pounded with fear that one day they would follow her tracks, that they would find them. That night, as Daniel slept, Lira sat awake, her mind torn in two. To stay meant risking everything, to leave meant betraying him. She touched his hand as he dreamed, his fingers curling gently against hers. In that small touch she felt her answer. She could not abandon him, not now, not ever. For the first time in her life she was needed. For the first time someone saw her not as broken, not as useless, but as Lira, whole and alive. And in that truth, she felt the beginning of something deeper, something dangerous. The unlikely bond between them was fragile, but it was real. And though shadows gathered on the horizon, Lira swore to protect it, no matter the cost. The bond between Lira and Daniel grew stronger with each passing day, yet so did the danger. The forest that once felt like a shield now felt like a trap. Her people's search parties moved closer, their torches glowing in the night like hungry eyes. Every snapped twig, every rustle of leaves made Lira's heart race. If they found him, they would kill him, and if they found her, she would share his fate. Still, she could not stay away. Each morning she brought him water, food, and herbs to ease his pain. Daniel's strength was returning, his eyes brighter, his voice firmer. But he could not yet travel far, not with his wound still raw. He wanted to move, to fight. But she shook her head firmly. "You are not ready," she told him, "and neither is the world." The village grew restless. The elders called for more warriors, their voices filled with rage. "They spread like disease," one cried. "We must cut them out before they poison us all." Others nodded, their faces twisted with fear and anger. Lira sat in the shadows, her stomach knotted. Each word was a dagger, reminding her of the secret she carried. She felt the weight of two worlds pressing down on her, and she knew the choice she made would decide more than her own fate. One evening, as the fires burned in the distance, she returned to the forest. With heavy steps, Daniel was waiting, leaning against a tree, his face pale but determined. "You've been gone long," he said softly. She lowered her gaze, her hands trembling. "They want war," she whispered. "They want all of you dead." Daniel's jaw tightened, but his eyes held no fear. "That is what they always want," he said, "but war is not what I seek." Lira stared at him, her chest tight. "Then what do you seek?" she asked, her voice cracking. Daniel looked at her, his gaze steady. "Choice," he said simply. "Freedom. For me. For my people. For you." The word struck her like lightning. Freedom. A word she had never tasted. A word her people feared more than death. She felt tears rise, but she held them back. She could not let him see how deeply his words pierced her. The next day, danger came closer. A group of hunters from the village entered the forest. Their voices carrying through the trees. Lira's breath caught as she recognized two of them, men who had mocked her since childhood. "They say one of the humans is wounded," one muttered. "If he's here, we'll find him, and we'll drag him before the elders." Her heart pounded as she crouched low, guiding Daniel deeper into the woods. His steps were slow, his strength not yet enough, but his will pushed him forward. She led him to a hidden hollow near the cliffs, covering their tracks as best she could. When the hunters passed near, Daniel pressed a hand to her arm, his eyes locked on hers, calm despite the danger. "Go," he whispered. "If they find me, let them take me. Do not risk yourself." Lira's eyes blazed, anger rising in her chest. "No," she hissed. "I will not leave you. I swore never to be claimed by them, but you, Daniel, you are not them." Her voice shook, but her resolve was iron. For the first time, Daniel saw fire in her that matched his own. He said nothing, only squeezed her hand with silent strength. The hunters moved on, their voices fading, but Lira knew this was only the beginning. Her people were suspicious, their eyes sharper each day. Soon, They would notice her absences, her silences, her distance. Whispers already followed her in the market. She walks alone too often, they said. She hides something, others muttered. Her stomach turned, dread curling in her chest. It would not be long before suspicion turned into discovery. That night, Daniel sat by the fire, his face lit by the glow. "You cannot hide me forever," he said gently. Lira lowered her head, her hands clenched in her lap. "I know," she whispered, "but I cannot lose you either." Silence stretched between them, heavy with truth. Then Daniel spoke, his voice firm. "Sometimes destiny does not ask if we are ready. Sometimes it demands we act." Lira lifted her gaze, her heart trembling. His words echoed inside her like a drum, calling her to something greater. For the first time, she realized the truth. This was not only about survival, not only about keeping him hidden. This was about a choice, her choice, to stand with her people who had cast her aside, or to stand with him, the human who had given her hope. It was a choice between chains and freedom, between silence and voice. And though fear coiled in her stomach, she knew destiny was already watching. As the night deepened, Lira sat beside him, their shoulders touching. She looked into the fire and whispered, "If the world turns against us, then let it come. I will not bow. Not to them, not to anyone." Daniel turned to her, his eyes reflecting the flames. "You will not stand alone," he said. Their words hung in the air, not as promises, but as truth. The bond they shared was no longer fragile, no longer a secret in the dark. It was a spark, one that could light a fire strong enough to defy the stars themselves. But destiny was not kind. Even as they spoke, eyes were watching, shadows moving through the trees. The choice had been made, but the challenge was only beginning. The forest had become their secret world, a fragile shelter away from judging eyes. Days stretched into weeks, and Daniel's strength returned slowly. His steps steadier, his voice firmer. Lira remained at his side, guiding him through recovery, her heart torn between fear and hope. Every laugh they shared, every story whispered by the fire, deepened a bond that should not have existed. But the world beyond their refuge did not rest. Her people grew hungrier for war, hungrier for blood. Whispers in the market had turned to open suspicion. "Where does she go?" they asked. "Why does the broken one wander so far from home?" Lira felt the walls closing in, yet she could not abandon Daniel. Something inside her had already chosen, though she did not yet understand how deep that choice would go. It began with small changes, changes she tried to ignore. At first it was only fatigue, a heaviness in her body. She thought it was the weight of fear, the endless strain of hiding. But then came the sickness in the mornings, the strange hunger that woke her at night. She pressed a hand against her stomach, whispering to herself, "No, it cannot be." Her kind had already declared her barren, broken, unfit. This was impossible. One night, as Daniel sat by the fire, she lingered in the shadows. Her body trembled with the secret she carried. Daniel looked up, concern in his eyes. "What is it, Lira?" he asked softly. She struggled to speak, her throat tight, her heart racing. I feel something," she whispered, pressing a hand to her stomach. Daniel's eyes widened, the firelight reflecting his shock. "Something," he repeated, his voice cautious. "A life," she breathed, her eyes filling with tears. "I think there is life inside me." The words hung in the air, heavy and unreal. Daniel's breath caught, his mind reeling. "It's not possible," he said. Yet even as he spoke, he saw the truth in her trembling hands. Lira shook her head fiercely, her tears spilling. "They said I was broken. They said I could never carry life." Her voice cracked, filled with both fear and wonder. "But now I feel it." Daniel reached for her hand, his own trembling. "Then this is no curse," he whispered. "This is a miracle." The words struck her heart, filling her chest with warmth and terror all at once. A miracle, yes, but also a danger greater than any she had faced, for if her people discovered this, they would never forgive her. They would call her child an abomination, a crime against the stars. Her stomach twisted at the thought of their judgment. But when she looked at Daniel, she saw not fear, only awe. Days passed, and the truth grew undeniable. Her body changed, her strength shifted. She felt the tiny spark of life growing within her. Every heartbeat was a reminder that the impossible had become real, and every heartbeat bound her closer to Daniel. It was no longer only about survival, no longer only about defying her people. It was about protecting the life they had created. But secrets could not stay hidden forever. One afternoon, while gathering herbs near the edge of the forest, Lira heard voices. 2 hunters from her village stood nearby, their eyes sharp, their whispers cruel. She wanders still. One said, "I saw her near the cliffs again. She hides something," the other muttered. "Perhaps a human." Lira froze, her breath caught. If they followed her, if they found Daniel, if they learned of the child. Her hands clenched over her stomach. She could not allow it. That evening she returned to Daniel, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. "They suspect," she whispered, her voice shaking. "They watch me now. They wait for me to slip." Daniel's jaw tightened, his gaze dark. "Then we must leave," he said firmly. But Lyra's heart trembled. Torn between 2 worlds, if they fled they would be hunted, if they stayed they would be discovered. Either way, the storm was coming. As night fell, Lira sat by the fire, her hands resting gently on her stomach. She whispered to the tiny spark inside her, "You are not a curse, you are not broken, you are hope." Daniel watched her, his eyes filled with quiet strength. "You are stronger than you believe," he said, his voice steady. "You carried despair for so long, now you carry life, and no one can take that from you." Her chest swelled with both pride and fear. The broken one was no longer broken. She was the bearer of a miracle. But miracles demanded a price. The next morning, distant horns sounded from the village, sharp and angry. Lyra's blood ran cold. Her people had found something, perhaps a trail, perhaps a clue. The hunt had begun. Daniel gripped her hand, his eyes meeting hers. "No more hiding," he said. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Lira nodded, her heart pounding. For the first time, she felt not only fear, but also fire. A fire that told her destiny was no longer a burden, but a choice. And she had chosen. The child inside her was the bridge between 2 worlds, and she would fight to protect it, even if it meant standing against her own blood. Her oath had once been a cry of despair. "Bury me here, I will not be claimed." But now it was something greater. It was a promise to her child, to Daniel, and to herself. She would not bow. She would not break. She would rise even if the world tried to bury her. The horns of the village echoed through the forest, sharp and merciless. Lira froze. Her breath caught, her hand instinctively pressing against her stomach. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice steady though his eyes burned with tension. "They know," he said quietly. "They are coming for us." The weight of his words sank into her bones. This was no longer suspicion, no longer whispers. Her people had chosen war against what they did not understand. Torches lit the night as figures moved through the trees. Dozens of them, warriors with sharp blades and sharper eyes. The forest that once shielded them now seemed to close in. Daniel stood tall, his wound still tender but his spirit unbroken. "We cannot hide anymore," he said, his voice like iron. Lira trembled, fear twisting inside her, but she nodded. For the first time in her life, she was not alone in her defiance. When the warriors reached the hollow, their leader stepped forward, an elder with eyes as cold as stone. "Lira," he spat, his voice dripping with disgust. "You were broken, but now you are cursed. You have shamed us all." The crowd murmured, their faces twisted with rage and fear. Lira felt their hatred pressing against her like a storm. Her knees shook, but she stood her ground. No, she whispered, her voice trembling but firm. I am not cursed, I am alive. The elder's eyes narrowed, his voice rising. You carry an abomination, a creature that does not belong to the stars. Daniel stepped forward, his presence commanding. This child belongs to life itself, he declared, his voice ringing through the trees. Your fear blinds you, but life is never a curse, gasps rippled through the crowd. Never before had a human spoken in their tongue. Never before had words cut through tradition so sharply. The warriors raised their weapons, but Lira stepped in front of Daniel, her voice cracked as she cried out, You called me broken, you cast me aside, but look at me now. She pressed a hand to her stomach, her eyes blazing. I carry what you said was impossible, life where you swore there could be none. The silence that followed was heavy. Every face turned toward her, some with fear, some with doubt, some with anger. But for the first time, none could deny her. The elder snarled, his voice bitter. You bring ruin, not hope. You are no longer one of us. Lira lifted her chin, her voice rising above his. Then I choose to be more than you, she declared. You buried me with your words, but I rose. You cast me into darkness, but I found light. Her gaze swept the crowd, her eyes fierce. You cannot decide my worth, not anymore, not ever again. Daniel stepped beside her, his hand finding hers. Together they stood against the storm. The warriors hesitated, their blades wavering. They had never seen defiance like this, never seen truth spoken with such fire. Some looked away, shame burning in their eyes. Others shifted uneasily, doubt cracking the armor of their anger. The elder's face twisted with fury. Seize them, he roared, but his voice no longer carried the weight it once did. A younger warrior stepped forward, his voice uncertain. If she is broken, how does she carry life? He asked. His words spread like fire, igniting whispers of doubt. One by one, voices rose in question, in hesitation. The elder shouted for silence, but the crowd no longer listened. The truth was before their eyes, and truth was stronger than fear. Daniel's voice rang out again, steady and unyielding. You fear what you do not understand, but your fear cannot stop the future. He raised his hand, pointing to Lira. She is not your shame. She is your hope. She carries a bridge between our worlds. The words struck deep. Carving through years of lies and chains, Lira's chest swelled with pride and fire. For the first time she felt whole, not broken, not cursed. Her oath, once a cry of despair, had become a promise of strength. I swore no one would claim me, she said, her voice steady as stone. And I was right. No one claimed me. I chose. I chose him. I chose life. I chose myself. The crowd fell silent, their eyes wide, their hearts shaken. The elder, trembling with rage, raised his blade, but before he could strike, warriors stepped between him and Lira. No more, one said firmly, his eyes blazing with conviction. She has spoken truth. Another added. The elder's power crumbled. Like ash in the wind, he dropped his blade, his voice breaking into silence. Lira stood tall, Daniel's hand in hers. The forest seemed brighter, the stars above no longer cold. She was no longer the broken one, no longer the outcast. She was the mother of a miracle, the bearer of hope, the bridge between two worlds. Her people would never see her the same. The universe would never see her the same. She had risen from despair to destiny, from ashes to fire. As the night gave way to dawn, Daniel whispered into her ear, You changed everything. Lira smiled softly, tears glimmering in her eyes. No, she answered, her voice filled with quiet strength. We changed everything together. And the stars, for the first time, seemed to shine not with judgment, but with promise. Her oath had been fulfilled, not in despair, but in triumph. She swore no human could claim her until one did, and it changed the stars forever.